Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And I was in Tucson last week, got to watch University of Arizona and West Point, the Army rugby team play. It was a great match. But it brought up something that was always a dilemma for me, and when I was coaching rugby, is how do you coach that next level when you don't have the basics? So we were just talking in the green room, and not to reveal any secrets of what's going on with the Wildcats in preparation, but so you went back to fundamentals last night.
Yes, sir. I think, as whenever you spend a day going up to that high level, super fancy, I always talk about the pretty stuff. Whenever you do a day on the pretty stuff, you need a day on the basics after that. Whether it's just the tackle tech, the catch pass. I mean, if you can't catch a ball and pass a ball, if you can't make a tackle, you can't win a game. It all goes back to the basics at the end of the day, right? And so, looking forward to playoffs. Got to reiterate the basics, get that all together. And I guess I'll keep everything else close to the chest because this comes out the day before the game, so I don't need Central Washington scouting a podcast, all right?
Hey, that's more listeners, right?
Yes, sir.
Hey,
why did we peak in Ellensburg, Washington? That's weird.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, speaking of pretty, I'll bring in our good friend, fellow veteran, and guest for today, Mr. Joe Connor. Joe, how you doing today, brother?
I'm fabulous. Thanks for asking, Otis, and great to see you, Cam, as well. And I've got to say, it's the first time I've been called pretty for quite a while.
Yeah, just breaking the ice, setting you up that we can just ease you in that way.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's our second date, isn't it? So that's okay, yeah.
So, Joe,
you don't put on the three-piece suit just to not get called pretty. Come on, Joe. We know.
Yeah,
we know what you're after.
Thank you. Yeah.
So what I wanted, and I wasn't going to start off this way, but Camden talking about the whole fundamentals thing. Really, I'm curious with you and your clients and your mastermind, and you've got a broad range. How do you stay in touch with the fundamentals that because those of us who've been around a couple of times know that the fundamentals is what makes us successful. How do you stay in touch with those fundamentals in your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I often bring myself back to the fundamentals as well, because it's important to understand and appreciate that. Like Cam, you were saying, you got to get the basics right. Because if you don't get the basics right, then the wheels start falling off. And the faster you go, the more the wheels wobble, and then it's just going to end one way. It takes me back to my military days. Like the marksmanship principles. If you see people missing the target, right, you just have to look at what they're doing, how they're holding the weapon, how they're breathing, whether they're squeezing the trigger, pulling it. And that's what I bring to when I'm working in the mastermind, because I've created 13 modules and I add to them all the time. And it's just about keeping it simple, stupid. I don't know whether that's PC nowadays. Keep it simple, sincere, maybe. But the fact is that keeping the fundamentals is really important. And when I'm speaking with clients, and I'm getting the feedback, I'm looking at the physiology, how they're acting, what the language patterns they're using. And then you look at the results and you can see that they're just getting something wrong, not quite right, which means that everything else falls out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be curious, talking about the fundamentals in business, I'm thinking, in the rugby world, you could ask any coach and they probably have a slightly different answer for each thing as far as what are those fundamentals. And I'm trying to start to define those. I think I'd throw that over to you, Joe. What would you say are those fundamentals in the business, those 3 or 4 things? Yeah, you have to make sure you're going back to and getting them right.
Well, one of the things I talk about is the team. Now when you mention the word team, whether it be in the military, rugby, or whatever, people have this vision of having multiple people, right? Now, if you're a one-man or a one-woman band, your team is one. the fact is that getting that team to function right with communication, the correct strategies, and understanding your cash flow as well. Are you starting with $1 or are you starting with 100 or 1,000 or multiples dollars? Because then you can cut your cloth to fit what your budget is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll share. I think back to my first business lesson was via rugby about capital. So I was. This is when I was starting to take over the club, and I was working really close with my rugby mentor and good friend John Patterson, and I showed him the budget, and he's like, "Where's your cash flow?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, well, if you're doing this and you got this, and what's the cash flow? And I'm like, I don't know. And it was such a, because, after years in the military, you don't worry about it. Nobody in the Army ever worries about. We play lip service to cash flow in the military, right? There's always more. Believe me, there is always more. There's always more bullets. There's always more money. But in the business world, it doesn't work that way. So that was a huge lesson. Do you have that point where you were early stages starting your business, Joe, and you did that? Oh crap! I need to be monitoring this. Could you walk us through that experience?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because I remember, because in the military, right, they spend. I calculated how much they'd spent training me as a soldier and bomb disposal expert and all the rest of the stuff. And I think they spent the best part of $250,000, maybe $400,000 on me, maybe a bit more. And then when you come out on Civvy Street, then all the training that you want to do to enhance your knowledge, you've got to pay for. And
That's right.
that was a big kick in the teeth for me, because I'm thinking, right, I don't get this, because I used to get all the training, the best training by the best coaches, mentors, skilled technicians for free. And well, it did cost, actually, because I gave my life to it just the same as you did. But I mean, there was no money exchanged hands. In fact, I got paid for learning. Right. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at, like, you want to do this course, it's $10,000 or, £10,000, and you got to do this, and this is how much time you're going to give up, which means you can't work, right? Mm-hmm. Which then affects your cash flow, because you got to take time out of the business. So that, and I suppose they're the battle scars that I bring to the mastermind, right? Because I help the guys appreciate and understand what they're doing. And my mission is to help 1 million veterans and business owners collaborate so they can achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. And that's my driver.
Why do you think people, and maybe I'll tie in the box on this question a little bit. Why do you think bosses are so hesitant to spend money, or spend, I think in their head, maybe the time is the bigger limiter, on developing their team? I'm blanking on who it was on the show, but they made the example of like how a lot of people go out and they buy the Ford Focus and they expect it to run like a Ferrari. And it's like, you just really can't have that. And then the best boss, quote unquote, buys you the book on how to become the Ferrari, but then it's like, do that in your own time. I still need you 40 hours a week. Why do you think bosses are so hesitant to give people the time and the tools to get better at their job?
Because my opinion is they do not see the value in it all the time. I mean, for me, and I suppose on the cash flow, it's more when you run your own business. But yeah, you're quite right. There are bosses out there who will not spend money on the training, and maybe they see it as a cost rather than an investment. Because some people know the cost of everything and the value of nothing.
That is such a great example. That cost versus investment, and how do you show that? That, and I can't remember who said this, but it's a fairly public phrase of train your people so they will so they can leave, but treat them so well so they'll stay.
Yeah.
I don't remember who said that, but it's such a great thing to think about. How have you? Well, I mean, yeah, I guess the straight up question is, how have you convinced clients that, hey, there is value in what you do with your business and how you do that? How do you help them see that?
Well, that's a great question. And one of the ways I go about it is finding out what their pain is. Because if what you've got doesn't solve something for someone, then it's not gonna end in the way that you thought it might do. That said, the fact is that I always leave a conversation having a brilliant experience, because I think that you just spend time with each other and learn about each other. The fact is, if I'm going to be talking about how I can help someone, I've already established whether they've got pain, and then we explore that. Because contrast, it's like I've just been on a podcast with someone else, and I know that we're going on a podcast together. You're coming on as my guest, Otis, and one of the things that I recognize is that failure is a great teacher, and success is the consequence of having that lesson. And so why I find the pain is because you cannot look to the future to find a solution and show what the success could look like unless you find the pain first. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's, and this is where I think that you and I get along so well. Is it's not transactional; it's a relationship. It is much more than that, and I think that's a differentiator in any business, really. I think it was Alex Hormozy talks about staying out of if you create your business, if you're not careful in how you sell your business and price your business and market yourself, you become a commodity. And when you're a commodity, the value is always decreasing because it's a race to the bottom. And I think what you're talking about is you're showing true value instead of, well, here's a school that you can go to, right? Here's a sales course or something like that. And what's the cheapest sales course I can get? It's demonstrating that value that you provide to the client.
Yeah. And it's not about the money, although we all need to be paid for the businesses that we do and the knowledge we impart and share with people. The fact is that it is the relationship, and pay or money is a silent applause for the job well done. So money is a secondary effect for me, because when I can deliver value through a great relationship and being there for someone, then that makes all the difference. For instance, I was with someone on last week, Friday, and he came to me. Well, his son referred me to him. He's 70 years old, right? He wants to leave the business. And he's got family in there. He's not confident that he can leave it to his family members at this time, and he's concerned about what may happen to it. I've spent 2 long sessions with him. The first was with him only. Then the second was with his family, and they were just really relieved at the way they changed in just one meeting. But you know what the biggest thing that I've found? Honesty and openness, where they communicated. And that's so important, I believe.
I'd be interested to talk a little bit about, when you talk about providing that value up front, it reminds me of a story I heard on a podcast the other day. And it's a guy who was a retired CIA agent, and was in, business consulting in that kind of world. And he was talking about how basically to get all of these deals, he would just find people in crisis mode and go solve these problems. He's not doing PR stuff, but because of his set of skills, he could basically go in and solve this completely different problem. And then it's like, hey, by the way, do you need some strategic advice? Hey, we're already here. We're working together, that kind of thing. Joe, I'd be curious what your thought process is on trying to find those, what's really to me is like another pain point that's not necessarily tied into your offer like that. Like I can provide this value to you. This is an immediate value. It's not really part of what our business is doing. It's something we can do, but it's not necessarily the offer. Well, what's your thought process on setting that up?
That is, I totally get where you're coming from. And usually how I start is I've got this tool bag, right? This tool bag has got a whole load of stuff in, right? I'll just leave it down here in a minute. Now, in that tool bag, there is like 50 years of stuff in there. I've got spanners, I've got wrenches, I've got screwdrivers, I've got everything. And as we start talking, right, I'll see that there's something that's not quite functioning right. And then we'll explore that. And then I'll pull something out of the tool bag and I'll say, oh, okay. Metaphorically speaking, of course. I don't get a big wrench out and bring it into the meeting. So
whack them upside the head with it, maybe.
Yeah. No violence, please. We're British. But yeah. And we're chatting, and that all of a sudden breaks the ice anyway, because it's having the trust. It's got to have the element of trust, because like, for instance, that comment I just made, no violence, please, we're British. If we didn't know each other, that may imply that Americans are violent, and that's not what I meant, right? That's not what I meant. But because we can have the crack, right? That it's whatever we say is coming from a place of sincerity, love, and trust, right? And I think that is why this meeting was transformed on Friday, because by the end of it, they recognise, wow, we can trust each other, and we can. Vulnerable is a strong word, and some people don't like that. But actually, when you can be vulnerable and say, look, I'm just not sure how to do this. Can you give me a hand? I mean, how many people have you asked for help and they've said no? There might be some.
Very few.
but I mean, the majority, we're pretty good human beings to help each other when we need to. Has that made sense for you, Cam, on your question, actually?
Yeah, and I think there's another layer to it, which is of the building trust and getting to that point. Because I think there's this really interesting thing, especially when you're in like the business coaching consulting world, where it's like, Joe, if they opened up their book and we could read everything that was going on and we could see all the problems, if they trusted enough to do that, then it's really easy for us to go in and go, oh, just do this, do this, do this. But getting to that point of that initial trust where they are vulnerable enough to open that up, I think that could be a really difficult thing. And I can't help but laugh a little because, Joe, between the three-piece suit and the accent, I mean, you probably checked 2 out of the 5 boxes needed to trust right off the bat. But what do you do to help to build that trust with people so they can be vulnerable enough for you to solve their problems?
Well, and that's another point as well. It's about dressing for the occasion. In the UK, we've got this program. It was way back when I was a young boy. It was called Wurzel Gummidge. And Wurzel Gummidge, right, was a scarecrow. He had a number of different heads or a number of different hats. And depending on what he was doing, whether he was thought process, having a joke, whatever, he put a different head on to suit the occasion. And I suppose that's what this does. It's a uniform. I suppose, like you guys have got your uniform for what you did. This is mine. But funnily enough, so as a professional financial advisor, when I'm going in to see clients, the majority of them expect to see someone turn up in a suit. Some don't. And the ones that don't are usually, well, I've got some clients who are builders, right, who own a building firm. Now, if I went into the building firm to see the directors in a suit, they'd think I was CID, which is the FBI or the CIA or something, because nobody on a building site dresses in suits. So I suppose the uniform is dressed for the occasion as well.
And that's such a powerful thing. I'll share my story of that. I think I'd been out of uniform, out of the military for maybe 2 months or so, and I was working for Lockheed Martin, very big corporation.
Oh yeah, I know.
And and most people, the executives always wore suits. The rest of us, open collar, maybe a sport coat sort of thing. And I didn't know that. And I was doing some work on a proposal and had my sport coat off and tie off. But then I had to go to a new employee class. So since I didn't know better, I put my tie back on, put the sport coat or suit coat on, walked into the room, and because I'd been working on this other project, I was late. I walked into the room, and I always remember the instructor. All of a sudden, he went from kind of slouching on the podium to standing up straight, watching me. And then I saw each individual person pick up on his body language around the room. And they all sat up straight and all put a pen in their hand and started to act like they were paying attention and taking notes. And I sat down in the back of the class, which added to the effect. I didn't realize this, added to the effect. And about 15 minutes or so, the instructor wrapped up that portion and put everybody on a break, made a beeline to me to introduce himself and shake my hand and appreciate you being here, sir, blah, blah, blah. He thought I was from upper level headquarters there to audit the class because I walked in a suit. And that, my friend, was a huge lesson in life right there.
I mean, it's just as well, actually, he said, and here is the lecturer, and take it away, Otis.
Yeah. Oh, I think he was about ready to.
Because that would have been a good laugh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so do you have a story like that where you've experienced or like you mentioned with the construction company, where you've showed up and gone, oops, maybe wearing the black tie affair sort of thing?
I was going to say, exactly. I want to hear that end of the spectrum, because otherwise we're all just going to be in suits all the time. There's a reason I don't have the jacket on for the podcast. We got to draw the line somewhere, right?
Yeah. Well, I've had the opposite, actually, where I've turned up and I've not been in a suit, and it was sort of the grey man, and they've not realised who I am. And then at the end, I've introduced myself, and it's been good because I've seen the real deal, if you know what I mean. Because they've not been waiting for someone. So I was able to give some honest feedback, and they took it well. I mean, by and large, it was a good overall presentation, but there were just a few things that could have been slightly better. And that was good. I can remember one time when I first started as a financial advisor way back, in the 80s. Then in the early 90s, I had a compliance visit, right? Now, I don't know what compliance visits you've had, but this was someone who just left the regulator and decided to become a compliance officer for the business. And they were supposed to be helpful. And when they came in, I was on edge anyway. I hadn't been a financial advisor for long. And honestly, it was like the grilling that you would not believe. And by the end of the day, I was exhausted, and that's talking about how power can be used in the wrong way. Because she knew she had the capacity to say, right, cease trading. I'm nervous as a young advisor. I hadn't done anything wrong, but just the way that she came across was just intimidating for me, even though I'd spent time in the military. This was in the business world now. And I think that a lot of times there are people in positions of authority that really don't know how to express themselves that well. Communication again. I mean, what experience have you had of that?
Yeah, a lot. And I attribute it to the individual's lack of self-confidence when they use positional authority. You see it in the military all the time, of course, right? Well, I'm a lieutenant colonel. You better salute me. Blah blah blah. It's like, okay, but
Yeah,
you
we'll
see
just
it.
we'll just put a target on your head as well, just so the enemy know who you are.
That's right. If you really want me to, I will stand here and hold that sword. Yeah, but in the outside the military, I think there is, because I've worked for a couple of people like this, and I've seen it as a consultant and executive coach looking in, and I attribute it to they're not confident in who they are, and they feel like if somebody is smarter than them or sees what they would perceive as a weakness, then they're going to lose their job or their authority or their ability to lead. And I think that's what it boils down to, is those people have that, they're missing that self-confidence. They're and what that means is they don't show up authentic.
No.
They're putting on this power veil, like you said, and I think that power veil is where it goes wrong, and where they stop being a leader and they just start being a dictator.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd add the. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, go on.
I was just going to add that I think the insecurity of yourself and your position in that, but then I think for a lot of folks it's also this hierarchical insecurity where they see that we talked about Spotlight Ranger type thing of, it's like, look, if I go and I'm yelling at people, they'll see I'm the busybody, I'm the one moving things around, and that's my path forward, rather than recognizing that if you do a good job and you give people their space and those kind of things, that's actually the best way to get the performance out of your team, which is the best way forward. It's the idea that if you let your team sort itself out, kind of just let things flow, it'd be a kind of a free-flowing leader and just touch things where you need to, that could get the best performance. But then the boss might go, that wasn't really Camden's leadership. That was just Joe really stepping up to the plate. And you're insecure about whether you'll be recognized for your leadership. So you feel the need to be the dictator because then everyone knows who you are.
Yeah. And it reminded me actually, back in the mid-'80s, I was over in Fort Lewis near Seattle, and we were working with Rangers. And we came over, there was only a small bunch of Royal Engineers to support the Scotch Guards, and we were working with the Rangers. And we were doing all the battle simulations and everything. And I had a job, and this is about communication and asking for help. One of my tasks was to use det cord, fuse wire, and detonators to simulate some rapid fire, gunfire, right? And I wasn't sure. This was only a small part. Then I had to do some other tasks as well. But I wasn't quite sure how to do something, and I never asked the question because I was scared to. So when we're firing off all the battle sims, everything's going well, and this rapid fire was supposed to come in from a GIMP, a general purpose machine gun. And it just one black couple of shots, and I thought, and then the sergeant came to me afterwards. He had a little interesting chat with me, and we looked. And do you know what I hadn't done? I hadn't exposed the wire. It was still in the sleeve, and I hadn't exposed it to put it into contact. And that taught me a valuable lesson, because even though it didn't ruin the whole simulation, the battle simulation, it just lost a bit of its integrity and purpose and wow factor. So I recognize now that if you're not sure, ask someone who is, because if you don't, it could be your rapid fire doesn't happen and it's just one shot.
What do you think, trying to kind of flip that around then, what do you think people can do in that management position, that leadership role, to build build an environment, a culture where people feel more comfortable, saying, hey, I don't know what's going on?
Yeah. I think that the old group, like the orders group, where you get together, the team together first, and what would it be? A team brief, I suppose, in civvy speak, a team brief, and just get together and say, right, these are the roles and responsibilities. Who's got any questions? What you're not sure about? If you don't want to ask out in the group, come and see me. We've got to make sure that this is right. And then you can go through the job. And that's not micromanaging, that's macro managing on a more bespoke basis, if that makes sense. Because I'm not looking over you to check what you're doing. What I am doing is coaching and mentoring you to make sure that you're happy. Because when you've got a happy, confident team, you can achieve anything.
Yeah, and that's so true. And what you're doing just by that simple thing is you're establishing that culture, so that it's a culture of, hey, it's okay to, one, maybe not understand and ask questions, and two, because the next step of that is if you're not sure, or if you are sure and you can, now the door is open to say, hey boss, what if we did it this way? I was over here and we were looking at this. And those two things, so simple, but so many businesses shut the door on those. Yeah. How have you approached clients? And I'm going to guess you've probably had a client or two that's been that way, and got and help them shift that mindset to where they're more open to that. Somebody asking the quote dumb question, because there's no dumb questions. The only dumb question is the one that Camden asks all the time.
That's a bit.
I pride myself on coming up with dumb questions.
I thought you were going to continue the words of wisdom by saying the only dumb question is the question you didn't ask. And then you totally shoot Camden down with no recourse for the poor guy, and he hadn't done any harm. He was just standing there smiling. I mean, wow, assassination or what? To get buy-in from the client, you see, because in rugby, in business, in any team, right? If you've got a manager, a team player, a leader who's so aloof that he thinks he or she knows everything, guess what? He's got a team that are going to talk to each other, right? And that team might say, you know what, the boss is really good, because when we had that team brief, I just wasn't sure what to do, and I went and had a chat with them, and they explained it to me, and now I was really good. And what it did was it meant that as a team effort, we really achieved it. Or you could go the other way. You say, that boss, that person who thinks he leads us or she leads us, they're absolute tosh. I wouldn't trust them. They're always making us feel stupid. They never help us. They just tell us what we've got to do, leave us to it, and we don't know what we're doing. And then they whinge when the job doesn't go right. So when I'm talking to leaders, I say, right, do you want to be on the A team or the B team? The B team's going to fail. The A team's going to win. Which one do you want? And then once we've got that, I say, right, okay, this is about your self-preservation, because when your team respect you, which is another key component, then they'll do anything for you. And one of the things we've got in the UK is because it's a tax advantage, right? It's called an employee trust, an employee-owned trust. And the tax advantages are for the owners who become very successful with a business, and then they've got multiple employees, people who work for the company. Instead of selling the business to someone else who might not care about it, it might be an equity firm, who come in and just change everything and lay people off and lean it and make it more cost effective. The employee trust, the employees buy the company, the owners get tax breaks for doing that, and the employees own it then. So it's like a cooperative. I don't know whether you guys have got cooperatives over where you are. The employees then are real players, they're team players, because they all understand what the mission is, and they've already got the culture from the business owners who've been running it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So that's where you've got a real team player. And I love going into organizations like that because you can already see the culture is right.
Sorry, I know we did exact same thing on each other, but we just did it again. No, I was going to ask on the communication side of things, how do you tease out what I would say is good communication, like this areas we're talking about? Because I think broadly, I mean, the way I wrote in my notes was this is culture of communication, establishing that culture of communication. Is there a distinction of kind of the BS, the pitter patter type things, and this good communication? Or is this one where, because I think, especially I'm thinking in my rugby examples, you kind of got to take both. You got to take a little bit of the BS from the team in order to also get those good ideas, those good questions, all that kind of stuff. What's your thought on finding that balance, Joe?
I think that the balance is real easy. And when I was with bomb disposal, when we get to an incident site, we ask a series of questions, and they're based on Rudyard Kipling. If you put in Google 6 Wise Men Kipling, you'll get the actual poem, and it goes along the lines of, I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. Right. So what I do is I ask those questions. Because when you get the questions, like for instance, if someone keeps saying, "Well, I just want to do this," and you say, "Okay, for what purpose?" And then they've got to come with another answer, and then you could just keep rolling it. For what purpose? Because then you get to the deep stuff. Because then you find out what they're doing it for, and who is it for, right? Who is your judgment affecting? When are you going to do it? Because that's a biggie. And where is it? Because like when we got to an incident, we say, okay, so who was involved? What is it that you've seen? When was it there? Where is it? We need to know where. And then the why is at the end. And what I do is I'm very careful with how I use the word why, because when someone asks, why did you do that? How does that make you feel? What have I done? Yeah, because it's accusatory, right? Right. Yeah. So why isn't a good question unless, like, finding my why is all right. Simon said it. And when your why is big enough, the how will come. I like using that because then that gives you the purpose. But I think that when you ask those questions, and I do a whole module on this in the mastermind, actually, you find you have that questioning technique, and I guarantee that any leader, whether it be rugby coach, leader of a massive team, because by the way, rugby coaching is really important. Because you learn so much about each other in rugby or in sport. Because you see where the weak links are. And do you guys, are you playing American football or do you play English rugby? Oh.
No playing anymore. My playing days are about 10 years behind me, but right. just coaching rugby. No American football.
Right. Okay. And what age group do you coach?
I coach at the college level, and then also the little kids. So I get the best of both worlds with that.
Oh wow, that's excellent, and you can see it, can't you? You can see how you've communicated something and whether they've got it, because they're either playing well or they're not, and then you've got to pick up on that. And it's the same in business, because I say to people, I say to my clients, right? Well, you've got me, and I'm your accountability partner. Because what we're going to do at the end of this session together, you're going to tell me what you're going to do. You're going to tell me. I'm not going to tell you, because I don't know if you ever been in a meeting where someone starts a highfalutin coach or a business mentor or someone who knows everything about nothing, and then they come in and they tell you, right, this is what, do this, do this, do this, do this, and they're coming up with suggestions and stuff that you've already done and it's not worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're telling you to do something, and then all of a sudden you're already switching off. Because 2 of these, 1 of these. I know I'm doing a lot of talking, guys, but you keep asking me these things called questions.
No, it's good.
So 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them proportionately. And I say this to my sons as well. If I'm getting a point across to them and they're objecting or doing something which I call excusitis, you know these things called excuses? I just call them excusitis. I say, you've got that disease again, haven't you? You need to get to the doctors with that, mate, because that's really removing responsibility for your actions away and results. And then they get it normally. So yeah, I love to ask the questions, then listen.
And I think there's just one thing I want to add on that, because I think this is something that I see in rugby a lot that I think you can apply in business, but it's something that we don't talk about as much in that setting, which is like the observational side of the communication. Thinking back to, Dad, you already mentioned our game against Army this past weekend. The ones did really well. They won their game. The twos lost. And in the twos, one of the things I'm watching, aside from all of the, the chess pieces moving on the rugby field, like I always talk about, but it's the mannerisms of people. When you make a bad pass, what do you do afterwards? When you miss a tackle, what do you do afterwards? And you can look at the same type of thing in your business. When somebody screws up, do they just get frustrated and give up on the project? Or is it, oh, my bad, boss, I'm going to get back to it, and they double down, in the rugby, since they missed the tackle and they're running all the way back to make the next tackle. And then in the business, are they moving forward, taking that extra energy to go fix their mistake because they want to fix their mistake? And you can start to see those things visually before they're usually communicated to you. So I think that's an important piece from a leadership perspective to help to build that culture.
Yeah, and
you could even go ahead, Joe. I was going to make a snide comment. Not really snide, but a more contemporary comment about Boeing.
Of course. They've got some issues.
Look at what's going on there. Are you meaning to tell me that the guy who's putting on that part didn't know something was wrong? So why didn't he have the drive, personal drive and care to fix something like that? Or did he report it and it not get up to the right people to fix something like that? And I think that's it's a cultural problem that you see in businesses. And what's sad about that one is there's lives. Thank God the last time it happened, it didn't cause any loss of life. But at that level and that type of thing, if you don't have that culture where, back to what we were talking about earlier, right? I don't understand, or maybe we ought to do it this way. Those 2 simple things to create that culture. If it doesn't exist, then that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a freaking door fly off your airplane as you're driving down as you're 30,000 feet, or I guess they were only at about 15 or 20.
Yeah, they were pretty low in comparison to being full up there. Yeah, and I think that comes down to accepting responsibility as well, because that's another important issue in being successful. Just accepting responsibility and saying, look, I didn't get it right, and what training do I need? What resources do I need to get it better, and how can I improve? And I don't know whether it's an age thing for me, because I know that when I joined the army back in 1981, the people who joined in the 70s say, "Oh, you guys get it real easy," and then when I was in 88 and I was looking back to who was joining then, I'm thinking, "Oh, this is a doddle," and actually it's just cultural. But I think that is it today that everyone wants perfection, like the social media, the pressures on kids having phones from a young age, and everyone being photoshopped and stuff, and perfection. And guess what? There's no such thing as perfection. It's just about being taking responsibility for your actions, recognizing that mistakes will be made and can be made, and what you do about it afterwards, instead of just saying, "Oh, it wasn't me. I don't know who it was." Yeah.
Before you ask your last question, Dan, I was just going to add, we did that episode a little while back talking about leadership cures all, and how, you have good leadership system and good leadership development system, how it can help all these different areas in your business. Talking about the Boeing example there, when you hear stories like that, and it's like, how did this get it's almost like when they release an ad, and you're like, how the hell did that check all these boxes? You guys put it out there, and it's freaking terrible or insensitive or whatever it is. What you have in those is you go all the way through the chain, and there's just not a leader. And it just keeps going up, and there's no leader who's willing to step up and say, "Hey, I messed up. My team got this wrong. It's my responsibility to fix it and move forward with it." If you don't have a leader, nobody's ever going to fix it.
No.
Yeah. So one of the other things that draws you and I together, Joe, is our passion to give back to our veteran tribe. Talk to us, share with us a little bit about what you're doing in that space.
Yeah, right. So, I've got a Veterans to Success podcast, which I get to interview guys like you, young guys as well, from military, whether RAF, Navy, and Army, of course, in different sectors of the forces. I've had some real interesting conversations, and what that's about really is that there's a theme to it where I look at what before your time before the military, because like just before today, which is another reason why I'm in a three-piece suit, not because I've been to court, by the way, just to put that one to bed. That I interviewed a guy, and he ended up being the commander at a staff college, the Royal Naval Staff College. Then he worked for the MOD as a defence secretary attaché. And for anyone from the outside would think, oh, well, you obviously came from a privileged background. And actually, he was born in Scotland in a village outside Edinburgh in a mining community. And his dad was a miner. If he hadn't joined the military, he would have ended up a miner, and his dad said, "Over my dead body, if you become a miner, you're not stepping your foot over this threshold again." And his mum left him and his three sisters when he was 7. And yet, now you see, you'd never think that someone with that background would be able to achieve what he did, and now runs his own business on Scottish excursions all around Scotland because he was Scottish, and that's the theme that comes through. And I'm sure, because we've had a good chat, Otis, and where we get on, I know that you're a driven person as well. And it's about never judge a book by its colour, because when I cover, even when I've got to build, as I said, we've got scaffolders out there at the minute. Now I use the same scaffolding for, all the time. On the occasions that sometimes I've been in a suit when a builder turns up, he gives me a price, and it's obviously it's a rip-off price. And I say, look, I haven't got a blue flashing light on my head. I may be in a suit, but I have had a life previous to today. And I know when you're pulling the wool over my eyes and giving me a price that's extraordinary, and when you're offering me a fair deal. And what happens then? They've either sort themselves out of the deal or not. So coming back to how I help veterans, I bring that knowledge, experience, and wisdom where I've been there. I haven't worn all the T-shirts. I haven't read all the books, and I haven't watched all the films, but I've done a few, right? Which means that I'm able to help the veterans. And what I'm running now is I'm running an online mastermind program, which will be released shortly. But the thing that I'm most proud of is the Pathfinder, which is 3 journals. It's the Pathfinder Ultimate Success System. And you will recognize the term Pathfinder. That's all about, and that was just a prompt for me to think, Eureka. So the Pathfinder is all about its reconnaissance, strategic advance, and tail end Charlie. The reconnaissance is about getting the mind ready. And it's a fairly short read, getting the mind ready, and it's a workbook. So you actually do work in it for success. Then the strategic advance is all about, that's really getting deep down with, there's lots of exercises in it, written exercises. The Taylor and Charlie is where you set your goals and then you measure in them each week. And because I like maths and I'm one for statistics, do you know a diary runs 1st of January to 31st of December, and it's pretty linear? Well, this is just week 1 to week 52, and it's not quarters, it's 13-week periods, because there's 4 of them in 52. And then there's every 4 weeks, and then you measure in the success of what you've set. And the reason I did this, what was the driver behind me doing this is, I don't know about you, but every year, around about October, November time, we get all these celebrities releasing, make this your best year yet, and all of those sorts of stuff, as if they're going to solve all my problems. Then I think, all right. So a few years ago, I said, all right, okay, let's have a look. I opened the book, which has got a spine on it, so you can't open it flat anyway. And then you look, and it's just a bunch of empty pages. And if they push the boat out with expense, there's some lines on it as well. And every 5th page or so, there's a motivational statement like, come on, make this your best year. And I'm thinking, how am I going to do that? Because I don't know how to write a success plan anyway. I haven't got a clue. I'm just play acting here. So what good is this to me? It's about as much use as a chocolate fireguard. So what that brought home to me is that I've got to come up with something that actually helps you do it. So the whole program is about giving worked examples, analogies, metaphors. I've even got where I've given some exercises, one in particular which goes quite in depth. I asked someone that I know well, I gave it to them and said, right, fill it in how you would. No names, no pack drill. They've just used it. Then I printed that in the journal. So I'll say, here's a worked example, and this gives you an idea how you can use it. Because some people like to see examples. I do, because I'm visual. Does that make sense? So,
yeah.
So that's how I'm helping veterans and business owners. And I've created the joeteams.com. That's joeteams.com membership site. And there's some stuff on there that's at no cost whatsoever, because I want to help as many people as possible. And you can find the Pathfinder in there as well. And that's like $6 a month if they join the membership program. So that's how I'm helping. Because I'm just passionate like you are, Otis, and Camden, because I know you guys have been doing this podcast for a while, and it's a very good resource. And I've listened to quite a few, not 217 yet. I've listened to quite a few, and I think that what you share is invaluable.
Yeah, and that's awesome, and I love the process that you have set up, and the reasons why you did it is so good, and yeah, the military mind, you've always got to demonstrate, right? So having that example in there, right? Oh man, dang, I can't remember how the phrase goes, but it's my left, your right, and that.
All right, and we've got one: demonstrate, imitate, practice. So I am now going to show you an about turn at the halt. The reason I show you this is so you, as an individual or a body of men, it was men back then, can turn through an angle of 360 degrees in a smart and soldier-like manner. All the same. Demonstrate, do it, and then get them to follow you, do it, and then, right, go away and practice. I mean,
there you go.
Those things don't die, do they? I mean, like, you can take the army, a man out of the army, you can't take the army out of the man.
No, that's awesome. And you know, this has been great. And I'm just thinking back to a couple of things that I learned, and some great metaphors, which always brings back fond memories of things. But I want to emphasize that this one that you said, which I think is so important to understand and believe, it is success is the consequence of failure. And knowing that, and when you screw it up, if you learn from it, success is coming. And if you continue to learn from it, when you miss that target and you continue to adjust and you continue to learn, that's how you have success. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, I think in our conversation about communication, Joe, what you were saying about, asking the 6 different questions, it had me thinking, because a lot of those I think were intuitive to me, thinking in the rugby setting, for instance, the who, the what, the why of somebody wanting to make a different read on a play. It's very easy to go, why do you think that would work? Who's going to make that run? What are you going to do with that run? And kind of going through all of that. But the when and the how adds so much more to the understanding for the player in that situation of when are you going to make that decision, and then how are you going to run this so that it can work out to our attacking scheme in the big picture. Because without those, you're still like the what, the why, the who gets you pretty far, but without those other questions, you don't get the full picture that you need to really implement something properly.
Yeah, and also, where are you going to be when that happens?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. Joe, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
Do you know what? I learned about your lives, how you bring things forward, and I particularly like the way that you're able to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Right on the things, because we didn't have any idea what we were talking about today, and I had a rough outline of what we wanted to achieve, and I think we've achieved that. And with your help, you were able to draw lots of stuff out from my subconscious, and hopefully it was good stuff. Well, you were smiling anyway, which is always a good sign.
That's
yes,
right,
sir.
I always say, as long as I'm having fun, I keep doing it. So, Joe, how do folks find you, learn about what you're doing with the veteran tribe in the UK and your mastermind?
Well, the easiest place to go is joeteams.com, because that is everything you can find there. You can go to www.thetransformer.co.uk, and then a charity that I'm involved with, where you can find out my why, I suppose, is transformationforveterans.org.uk, because we're building, our mission is to build some lodges in the countryside for veterans to come along with the family, because often the families are left out, right? I don't know. I think you've got a really good respect and system in America, better than ours, right? Because thank you for your service is a great attribute that you regularly come out with. It's not used so much here in the UK, and I'd like to think that it will be at some stage. And bringing the family along, because when a guy goes away for a few weeks, comes back and say, "Hey, I'm cured," and the wife or husband and the kids say, "What about us? You've made us suffer for years with your bad temper or whatever it is, and you go away on a swanny for a few weeks, come back and you say you're cured, and we're supposed to like that, are we?" And if they don't say that, they're probably thinking it, right? So these lodges are designed where we bring the family together, and that's my mission, and that's what my mission is to do.
Love it. Joe, thank you so much for spending time with us today, man.
Thank you very much, Otis. Thank you very much, Camden, for your time, and I love being on your show.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Joe O'Connor, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time.